Welcome back, guys. I think we're live, and I hope you've all had a really great week. Um, yeah, it was quite an interesting one for the campaign, that's for sure. So, as I alluded to earlier in the week, what we'll do today is have a quick sort of recap over what has happened, and then we'll get your thoughts and opinions on whether we should continue or whether we should just call it as it is. I'll also give you some thoughts from the guys that I've been playing with and what they want to do next, so we can all kind of just be on the same page. Excuse me. So yeah, last turn, let's just have a quick recap of what happened. We had the Union were at Strasbourg with General McDowell, and we had General Shields at Woodstock. We had Jackson, who was, can't read the names, Wardensville, and General Ewell was at Baker, and their orders were to move across and head towards Strasbourg. Heavy rain meant that they could only do one bound each, so Ewell got to here, and Jackson got to there. Union orders were for both of the, well, sort of all the Union forces to try and converge on them. So we had troops move from Winchester to there. The troops from Newton cut across country. McDowell cut across country, and Shields moved across country. So we ended up with two battles being fought, both of which, unfortunately for the Union, they lost. So that wasn't too good for them. General McDowell, as he left the town, hey Luke, how you doing? No worries. We're just doing a quick recap. So as I said, as General McDowell left, we had the Confederate force of cavalry just on the other side of the river, who snuck across and occupied the town. These Union troops were marching south, but they weren't quite fast enough to get there themselves. So Strasbourg fell. General McDowell, in his battle, lost, and so as he was forced back, his army was so depleted, they ended up basically just surrendering. Shields, on the other hand, his army suffered quite badly whilst it was trying to get into position due to the heavy rain. Their troops came on basically very slowly. Every 3 turns, I think it was, a new division arrived. And so as they tried to flank around to get into assault positions, they were just getting bombarded, and the army quite literally just fell apart. So that wasn't good for them whatsoever. Luckily, their route was clear, so they were able to fall back in some semblance of order, although it was iffy, let's put it that way. Over in the far west, the pursuit continued, and the Union troops have now got to the ferry crossing, so they're nearly home to Cumberland, whilst General Johnson just pursued them. And that was basically the end of last turn. Census of opinion from me and the other players is that it is a Confederate victory. Shields' force is highly depleted. They're now cut off as well from supply lines, so they're just going to be suffering each turn. Here we've got a small division, I think it's 2 brigades and an artillery battery. There we've got a battery, and here I think it's 2 infantry and a battery, or it might be 2 infantry and 2 cavalry. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they're all sort of smallish in size, so not overly strong. That said, for the Confederates, here they've got 2 small-ish cavalry units and an artillery battery. Jackson's force, highly depleted, and Ewell's force, probably the strongest out of the whole area here, but even they took some casualties last turn, so they didn't get off scot-free. So that's where I put it back to you guys. Do you think we should call it, or do you want to continue for another turn? Over here, Johnson's force is still strong versus the Union, who are very weak. I said it all along, we'd send them skedaddling back home. Exactly. Yeah, and I think we pretty well have. When we look at it sort of from the victory points perspective, the Confederates have won. When we look at it from leaders who have died, there have been quite a few casualties on both sides, but the Union have suffered more, either dead or captured. The objective for the Confederates was to prevent Union troops from being able to be sent to the Peninsula Campaign and the assault on Richmond, and they've just drawn even more troops into the valley, so they've succeeded there. So from a game campaign perspective, I think it is a Confederate victory. Being turn 10, we've only got 3 turns left, so unless the Union could basically get all of their surviving troops together, I don't think they would have the manpower to win, because they would have to destroy all of the, well, at least Jackson's main force here. Johnson's a bit on the periphery, but they pretty well have to destroy all of that lot to succeed, which I don't think they're going to do. Never say never, but yeah, I think it would be very, very hard for us to be able to coordinate that on the map without Jackson being able to strike out and take out Shields first or take out this group. I think it would be very hard. So again, I'll leave that to anyone who wants to comment. But at this stage, I think we leave it as a Confederate victory, unless anyone wants to chime in. Whilst you guys are thinking about that, well, the guys that I've been playing with, we thought what would be quite fun anyway would be to have kind of a bit of an alternative history. And we'll go back one turn, so to speak, to when Shields and McDowell were still strong, and then we might just have one final battle whereby we would say they were able to merge and march across, and these troops all merged, and then we'll kind of say, oh yeah, Jackson and Ewell come through, and we'll just have a hypothetical, interesting big battle at the end to see what would have happened if the Union could have coordinated all of these troops to have merged into one position, and then we could have had one big fight. So we're planning on doing that this weekend. It's not going to change the outcome of the campaign, I don't think, because, yeah, like I said, I think it's a Confederate victory, but it'll give us a good ending, a good big battle, which would be quite fun. So hopefully you guys would enjoy that. So yeah, next turn, if there is one, I'd say Johnson to finish off, while remaining rebels consolidate and aim to fall back to Harrisonburg for a big defensive position. Fair enough. However, Jackson's army of the valley will not be getting to the peninsula. That's true. That's the other side to it. If you look at the bigger strategic situation, it does mean, yeah, Jackson's force, even if it could get over there, is so badly depleted, it's not really going to be able to do much. So there is that aspect too. So I guess I would say it's probably a Confederate victory in the sort of the local area. From a strategic point of view, maybe it's more of a draw. But then you could say, oh, but if you didn't have Jackson's troops over and then in the peninsula, then it could have made a difference over there. So yeah, so many what ifs and buts. Definitely a very interesting subject. Just give me a second to have a quick drink. So, excuse me. So, would you guys like to do one more turn? Or shall we call it? That's the question. Because, yeah, we could try, as Luke, as you said, if there is one, Johnson to finish off it. He could carry on pursuing, that's fine. While the remaining rebels consolidate and aim to fall back to Harrisonburg. So, with our objective was stop you, though. That's true. To the peninsula, the best bet would be to exit immediately. For the Confederates, if we were just going for what you were saying, Luke, would you be wanting them to try and extricate themselves that way, the sort of the long way to get back round, or would you want them all to try and converge and smash Shields as they went? Valley victory for the Red. Yeah, I'd say that's probably quite accurate in the great scheme of things. There, David. Yeah, because that Jackson's forces were pretty pivotal in different areas. So if they weren't able to get over there, and I guess the Union troops that were going to go across, yeah, I mean, they could have joined up with the other federal armies which were threatening Richmond, but in this case they wouldn't anyway. So that part still replicates history, which is quite good. Yeah, the long way and circumventing. Okay, so you just want them to march all the way back round. Okay. The only thing with that would be, again, we'd have to put it to all the people to vote again, but if they were marching around that way, then it's bad weather at the moment, so they're probably at most going to get 2 bounds. So they'd be looking at getting there this turn and maybe there next turn, which would give the Union troops a chance using the main road and all the train lines to probably cut them off at that stage. And then we'd have a battle basically where that bridge is. But we could still do that. But yeah, just keep thinking about that, and we can do that if you want. There's no, hey, it's a 12-turn campaign, so we can keep going. I've got no issues whatsoever. Just a question to all of you guys who've been sort of watching, possibly playing along, what have you. What were the sort of things that you thought went well, and what things did you think maybe could use more work as well? McDowell was recalled to cover Washington. He never linked up. Yeah. Yep, that's true. Yeah, he did. So fair point. Yeah, I would say I do agree with you there, David. The campaign is lost for the Union, and so it is a Valley Campaign victory for the Confederates. Now it's more of a mopping up operation, I would say. Historically speaking, I'm trying to think what the Union would possibly do in this situation. I would say probably their best bet would be to, I'm not sure about Shields, he's kind of trapped. He'd probably have to try and do something on that line. Or, I don't know, try and cut down and cut across country, but who knows? Probably coming this way east would be better, and then try and get back up to like Manassas Gap or Front Royal. But yeah, I would say probably due to the strengths or comparable strengths of their different units, which are all dispersed, at this stage, it would be more of a defensive position they'd have to get into because they just don't have the numbers to really go on the offensive, even though the Confederates are more themselves. I don't think really the Union are in a position to be aggressive. So probably, I don't know, Winchester, Front Royal, Harper's Ferry, they'd possibly pull back to those positions, one of them, and then they'd at least be able to wait until reinforcements come, if they come. Yeah, there's a little town called Sharpsburg just up there. And yeah, for the Confederates, I mean, if Johnson can finish them off up there, and then he could come across to join the rest, his numbers would really make a difference. Because probably his army at the moment would add on at least a third, if not slightly more, to the overall strength of the Confederates. And then they might be able to clear the whole region. Interesting options. But yeah, I mean, overall, from my perspective of sort of running the game, really enjoyed this campaign. Thanks, Dave and Kamikaze, for being honorable opponents. Yeah, a whiskey and a cigar together when this war is over. That sounds jolly decent. I hope I'm invited to that. And McClellan on the peninsula was under the erroneous impression that he was at. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you got to love little Mac for his always underestimating the enemy. Yeah. And I've lost my thought. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, overall within the campaign, I'd say the things that went well. I think it moved quite nicely due to the nature of the way that we've been using the movements within the game, of sort of like bounding between towns rather than using centimeters or inches of movement. I can see it has pros and cons. Pros, especially if you've got someone who's kind of newer, because that's the way I was writing it. We need diplomacy. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I was writing it in regards to newer people being able to pick it up and get on with the game quite quickly, but also people like ourselves who are a bit more into it. You could easily modify the rules as you go to make it into however you want it to be as realistic as possible. And that's why I was just saying, oh yeah, we could just do a bound or 2 bounds. Just makes it easier and more simple. But theoretically, I would say yes, to make it more realistic, you'd possibly want to change from bounds to distances. And then, yeah, the armies could stop halfway between. if needs be, and that might have added a little bit more realism to it. Dance, yeah, exactly. But apart from that, I think movement went quite well. Um, some of Mark's points on like the way the weather works, and we've adjusted that as we went. I think has worked quite nicely. So it doesn't just change straight away. It takes several turns now from heavy rain to get back to dry for the movements and that sort of thing. So that's developed nicely as the campaign's gone along. Yeah, overall, I can't remember who it was that mentioned troops advancing against defensive positions and maybe not taking enough damage. So we've rectified that in the rules also. And now, yeah, I think we're getting a pretty realistic outcome to when troops are attacking defended positions. And for the most part, they're not making it, or maybe 1 in 4 make it. So that's pretty good. So again, that's from you guys. So I really appreciate that. I've really appreciated all of your input in the campaign as a whole. Yes, it will. I've been updating it as we go. So every time we've made changes each week, I've just updated it as we went. So that way it's the most updated it can possibly be at any one time. And then what I'm planning on doing once we've finished the campaign is everyone that's purchased up to this point, I'll just re-email them the new one so that everyone has the latest version, just so everyone's all on the same page, so to speak, and it's fair for all. So if you have already got it, you'll be getting the newest version. And if you haven't already got it and you buy it, you'll get the newest version. That's kind of the way I like to do it with the rules. I just keep updating them as we go. And then I'll update people as they've purchased in the past. So that's, I think, the fairest way to do it anyway. Yeah. Was there anything else that struck me during the games? I don't think so. I think the fact that as the campaign drew on, the units were sort of struggling to resupply themselves more and more, which I think is quite realistic of any military campaign. So I like that aspect. That to start with, you had quite big armies who were fresh and ready to go. Oh, cool. That sounds good, Luke. Probably give me to the end of the weekend, and then I'll have updated all the rules with everything that we've modified over today and over the last week or so. And then, yeah, it'll be all good to go. But I'll post that in Facebook that it's all ready. So that's good. Thank you very much. So yeah, I think it's been good. Yeah, I mean, to give a bit of context on that, it wasn't actually supposed to be a piecemeal attack because of the fact that the Confederates were in defensive position. The plan for the Union was that first division was going to try and march up and then swing left. And then by the time they got into position, the second division would have arrived and they would have more or less got into position at the same time. And then the third likewise. So once everyone was lined up with the final group arriving, then all three would have been able to converge and attack at the same time. So that was the plan. But then due to the heavy rain, which delayed them, it also meant that the troops were moving slower on the field. And it also meant that the Union had very bad luck when it came to rolling for their artillery to be able to fire. I think the Confederates had 2 turns maybe where they couldn't fire, and the Union I think only had 1 turn where they were able to fire. So yeah, the artillery for the Union just wasn't able to do anything. It wasn't able to suppress the Confederate artillery, and the Confederate artillery just kept bowling shot after shot into them, and yeah, it was a nightmare. Yeah, I thought that too, Luke. Yeah, as the numbers just kept getting depleted, and although it was easier whilst the Confederates were sort of holding the bigger towns, because that allows them to sort of maintain more units without needing supplies being sent up from the depots. As they started going on the offensive and going through these smaller towns, less units were in direct supply because the small towns can only support 2 units rather than the 4 that the large can. So as the armies converged and had more troops in them, and then they moved into smaller towns, it was pretty tricky. So yeah, it was a real struggle to try and keep the numbers up for both sides as well. I mean, again, with the Union, as they started moving out into the smaller areas and their numbers started getting depleted, it was a real tricky one. But yeah, as you say, as the Confederates kept fighting, they weren't really getting many reinforcements. Whilst the Union, it was another division and another division and then another division. It was pretty tricky. And I think really up until maybe 2 turns ago, it could definitely have gone either way. Even last turn, if the weather had been good, I would say it could have gone either way. I mean, the battle here where you had McDowell coming across, again, it may in the battle report have looked kind of crazy. Why were those two Union infantry units just marching straight towards the town? The reasoning, to again fill you in on that, was due to, again, heavy rain, the rebels being very, very depleted, and those two Union brigades being very strong. The best possible action was just to try and get in as fast as possible, so march up the road. Again, this time in this battle, the Confederates were suffering pretty well when it came to not being able to fire their artillery. So for about up until that last second, when the Union were basically within charge range, the Confederates hadn't got a single shot off. So it had really messed them up. And so one more turn of that, and those heavy infantry units would have been able to take the town, and they would have walked straight through it. Because I mean, I think the rebel infantry in the town, you had one which was 6 cohesion, one which was 8 cohesion. It was nothing. Whereas both of those Union units were about 16. So yeah, they would have just swept the town. And whilst they were doing that, the plan was for that cavalry and the other infantry unit coming from slightly further north to come in, and they would have smashed their way in from that side of the town. But it was just unlucky that at that last second, all of a sudden the Confederate guns were all able to fire, and yeah, it just blew them away. So it was quite devastating, but it almost worked. Luke, but then you'll refuse to move in a turn, which lost me a chance to. Yeah. That was very annoying when he was back there and he got confused with the orders, so he just sat there. If we could have had the two of those together, that would have made a difference. And yeah. But then again, perhaps if they had merged there, the Union players would have come up with a different plan where they would have merged their armies instead of coming on sort of in 2 separate routes. So that could have potentially affected it in a different way. I do love all these what ifs. It's always so interesting. So, thank you very much for taking part, everyone, in the campaign. So just last question is, do you want us to try and do the next couple of turns? Excuse me. Or shall we call it a day and then just have the one big final battle that I was mentioning earlier, the sort of the what if battle, if they had all converged at the same time? I'll leave that to you to make your decision now, you guys. And if you want to, then we can do it, and we'll kind of just play it out on the map. Blood Gang, any thoughts on what your next campaign might be? Ooh, interesting. Excuse me. So currently I am working on the Napoleonic Wars book, rule book, and I am working on an 1814 campaign for that. So I'm not saying we have to do that one, but that will be an interesting one. At the moment, I'm still at the process of making the map itself for it, because it's quite an interesting battle campaign. Sorry. So that's the next rule book and next campaign that I'll be releasing at some point. So we could do that one. But equally, what I'll do, I think, is probably just put it to the polls again, and then you guys can decide which period and which campaign, etc. And if you choose something which I haven't been working on, then we just have to have a bit of a wait until I get the maps and everything created for it. But if you've chosen one which we already have, even easier. The replayability of this rule set, different weather. Yeah, that's the thing with the weather, as you say, Luke, and all the different routes which are available. it really does make it very interesting and replayable, depending on which side you're playing as, who you're playing against. Yeah, there's so many different variables. Okay, exactly what I guessed. So you're looking forward to a Napoleonic game, I guess. Which so am I actually. I just base coded some troops to paint up today as Nassau and Brunswick and Dutch Belgium. Was it you, Luke, that was asking for a tutorial on Dutch Belgian infantry? Because if it was, I am working on those today. Just spray painted them before we started, so watch out for them in the coming weeks once I get around to actually editing the video. And you are very welcome. Thank you guys for all of your support. I enjoyed it. Was cool. Yeah. I enjoy it. I enjoy all of your feedback and just the sort of community aspect of it. So thank you all as well. But yeah, you're welcome. It's very enjoyable for me. David, if we are going Napoleonic, I'd go with his. I started his Napoleon, the first campaign in Italy, and I saw a map which was just like North Italy, as far as Milan. I was like, that's not too big. And then I watched a documentary actually on the campaign, and it just became so huge. So we could do, but that one would have to take me a bit of time to actually recreate. So if everyone votes for Napoleonic Wars, then I'll get some options, and then you guys again can vote on which of the campaigns you want to do, and then bear with me whilst I put it together. But yes, okay, looks like we've got a bit of a consensus here of people wanting to do Napoleonics, so that's pretty cool. The only thing with Napoleonics would be that, not a problem, but I don't have Austrian troops, so we would be using proxies for any Austrians that are fighting. I guess I could paint some up, which I might do in due course. So watch this space is probably a better thing to say. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much, Luke. So cool. I think that pretty well wraps up today. Unless you guys have anything else that you would like me to do. Proxy's fine. Cool. Yeah. Proxy will be fine. Depending on when it's going to be, though. The 3D printer was having an electric issue a little while ago, but they've just sent me the replacement parts. So that'll be back operational by the end of today. So I've got some Tiger tanks to print out for some crossfire games. So if I can find some STL files for Austrians at the sort of warlord scale, then I will just make an Austrian army. It's not really, it'd be quite fun to do some tutorials for them anyway. So Marengo, Lordy. Yeah. Okay, maybe we will do that. That does sound fun. Yeah. Okay, cool. Probably just in regards to next campaign, I will probably need a bit of time off from this one just to catch up with other things. Just because when we're doing the campaigns, I kind of put more focus on this than I do painting, which is why sort of the painting tutorials have kind of dropped off a little bit. So for the next month or so, I'll probably just be more concentrating on the modeling side, just because, yeah, it's time for me to do some more of that. So maybe we might be looking at possibly a Christmas time next campaign. Gives us a bit of time. I could start doing the polls shortly in the next few weeks as to what we're going to be doing. And then again, that'll give me time to get maps and stuff ready. So yeah, that could work quite nicely. I do have the 6mm, but I haven't actually done much more on them than those first tutorials. Other projects kind of took precedence over them. So at the moment, we've got one base of Russians and one base of Austrians. So I could paint them up really quickly, though. That's a very good point at 6mm. So yeah, why not? And we've got tons of British and French. So although the British wouldn't be much use, but the French we've got tons of in 6mm. So I could probably do those quite fast. So good points. Cool. Oh, that's actually quite exciting for the future. Looking forward to getting into a Napoleonic campaign, that's for sure. So yeah, watch this space. Winter campaigns are never a good idea. That's very true. However, in New Zealand, it's summer, so winter is summer here. So it's actually the other way around. But yeah, once again, guys, thanks to all of you for your support. and your time that you've committed to watching and commenting and voting and everything that you guys have done. So thank you for that. And we will definitely be talking again soon. I may do more odd live videos just in general as we're sort of making the plans for the next campaign. Probably be quite a fun thing just to get people's inputs. So yeah, we can definitely do that. But for now, unless you guys, as I said, unless you've got anything else for me, I will wish you a good morning, good evening, or good whatever time of day it is where you come from. And I hope that it goes well. You're welcome. And thank you guys. Cool. Take care and enjoy your weekends, which are coming shortly. See you guys.